Growing audience that we have here wants to know, how much money do I need to make as an Orthodox Jew living in a somewhat busy city? How much do I need to make in order to stop my hishtadlis and now focus on my learning, etc.?
That is a super hard question to answer, and it has a lot of variable. Let's discuss it. First thing is first. Before we understand how much we need to make, let's understand how much the average non-Jewish person in America is making. And that'll just provide a context and perspective for the rest of the conversation, just to show you how difficult and challenging it is sort of to live within our variables.
Hey there, and welcome to the first episode of Kosher Money. Super excited to be here. I was approached a couple months ago by my brother Yaakov of Meaningful People fame, Yid with Sign, and he said, I think we got to do a podcast about money as it pertains to the Orthodox Jew. I said, go on. He goes, budgeting, investing, spending, expense. I said, sold, I'm in, let's go. Where do we shoot? So 2 months later, we teamed up with the great Zevy Wolman over at Baltimore, and you'll hear in episode 1 just how many organizations he's involved with. And I thought he would be a perfect person, together with Yaakov, who started these podcasts. He's created something called Living L'Chaim, which also very excited to see all the different podcasts he's going to create. And Zevy over at the OU, they've created Living Smarter Jewish, a lot of living. And you'll see in episode 1, we really focus on the core topics, just a sneak peek into other episodes. I think you'll like Kosher Money. Without further ado, I give you Zevy Wolman. Being a Jew, awesome. Managing personal finances, not so awesome. Welcome to Kosher Money. This episode of Kosher Money...
Okay, so my brother's laughing because we did this a few times and he kept on saying the wrong website domain. So I'm going to say it.
No, I got it. I got it this time.
Fine, go for it.
This episode of Kosher Money is brought to you by livingsmarterjewish.org. What is that?
Okay, so livingsmarterjewish.org. You hear a lot about them in this episode and other episodes. They're an awesome organization that helps people tackle these from finance questions that we all have, and you'll hear so much more about them. They're an awesome resource, and you could get more information about them by going to the website and
you want me to say the website again?
No, also emailing them. What's the email?
Okay, I got it. info@livingsmarterjewish.org. That wasn't so bad, right?
There you go.
Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Kosher Money. I'm your host, Eli Langer. I'm here today with Yaakov Langer, a brother of mine.
Hey, how's it going?
And together here with Zevy Wolman of Living Smarter Jewish. And our focus here in Kosher Money is to try to help the Orthodox Jew navigate the frum finance world, a busy world, a hectic world, a lot we know about, a lot we don't know about. Zevy's here with us today on behalf of Living Smarter Jewish. Tell us a little bit about what Living Smarter Jewish is and what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, so thank you so much. It's really cool to be here with you and with Yaakov, both of who I've followed for a while, so this is kind of exciting for me as well. Living Smarter Jewish is a brand new organization. I personally have been passionate about personal finance for a really long time, and it's something I care deeply about. It's something that I see affects a lot of people. So we're starting an organization to really provide the Orthodox community with a full sort of, I want to say solution, but an opportunity to really get their arms around their financial situation. So the goal is really to have 3 separate parts. The first is a general conversation about the Torah's perspective on personal finance and sort of changing hearts and minds or inspiring people through content like this and Mitzvah Shem, a lot of other content. The second is to provide people with tools, like practical tools that they can use in their own lives. Easy, like tools that are easy to access, easy to use, easy to understand, and easy to incorporate into their lives. And the third thing is, on a retail level, we really hope to be able to help people one-on-one to provide free personal financial counseling for people across the country, no matter where you are, in person if possible, and even if not, via Zoom. And so that's going to be the goal of Living Smarter Jewish.
I'm salivating because this conversation, like what I hope and what this will help people with, is the type of conversations that whenever it always comes up, whether you're by a meal or you're just talking to a friend about, you know, their business, and we all struggle with some way and somehow finances struggle our lives.
Exactly.
So I personally want to listen to these episodes so I could really gain that knowledge.
No, for sure. I mean, can I tell a joke? Are we allowed to tell jokes on the podcast?
One joke per episode.
One
We're
joke.
in
Okay,
Gaulis, but okay,
we'll try. So, but it's okay. It's good. It's a Jewish joke. So Jerry Seinfeld was once asked by a non-Jewish comedian. He said, "Can you tell me a Jewish joke?" So Seinfeld said, "Sure, I'll tell you a Jewish joke." He said, one Jew asked another Jew, "How's business going?" And the other guy said, "It's going amazing." Okay, that's the end of the joke. You can laugh now, right? No. So what's the point of the joke? Is like no Jew would ever tell another Jew like, "Oh my gosh, things are amazing. Like, let me tell you about money. Let me tell you about my personal financial life." Like, we don't talk about it, right? Like, people would sooner talk about things that are theoretically way more personal, than personal finance. So I feel like the goal of this episode and what you guys are so good at is getting people to talk and getting people and opening conversations. And I feel like if we can achieve that with this podcast series, like just talking about things that people aren't talking about, even though it affects them, and it probably affects everybody that they know also, but because nobody is talking about it, it just goes unspoken. And that's, I think, what I'd love to see, and what I think you guys are going to be great at, is sort of like starting these conversations.
So you would say people aren't naturally good budgeters, investors, savers, handling their expenses. It's something that they're currently learning as they go, probably not to the way they should. Do you feel that this is something that is a very large issue in the community? Does it impact some people and not others? What does the data show you in terms of the issue at large in the community?
So you asked about budgeting, so we'll just start with that one.
Well, Eli asked like 7 questions.
He asked like 7 questions. So yeah, so we'll come. Let's go one at a time. So you asked about budgeting. So it's a really good question. So we started a Mesila in Baltimore, which is an organization that was based in Eretz Yisrael. We started in Baltimore. We were the second branch in the United States. We started in 2009, so we've been going for 12 years now. Mesila's counseled about 650 families approximately in Baltimore, plus given many more classes to Chassanim and Kalas and young people. And so the budgeting question. I think, for whatever reason, and I have no idea why, we learn algebra, calculus, trigonometry, and Shakespeare in high school, and we don't learn basic personal finance, like building a budget and the difference between checking accounts and saving accounts and credit card and good debt and bad debt. Like,
I know about Sokotoa though, so
I don't know what that is.
No, really?
No.
Ellie, do you know Sokotoa?
Sudoku?
No, Sokotoa. It's like it's in trig. Okay, I thought it was.
But this is not an Orthodox Jewish issue, right? You would say that
100%.
The Dave Ramseys of the world are trying to help anyone and everyone with their finances.
And actually Congress right now is taking up this issue to mandate that personal finance be taught in curricula across like schools in America. So this is not in any way, shape, or form the budgeting. There are Orthodox specific issues that we'll talk about, I'm sure. But like from a budgeting perspective, like you can't ask somebody to know something that they weren't taught. Right? Like I'll give you an example, and this is like one story. This did not happen to me, but I heard it from the person that it did happen to. Is that there was a couple that was living in Israel, like they had just gotten married, and there was a couple that was living in Israel they were having like financial issues, and so they got a counselor or whatever it was, and the wife said, like, I don't understand. She's like, we have no money left, but I still have checks in my checkbook. So how is it possible that we don't have any money left? Now, that made like an extreme example, but like on some level, like if you're not taught as a kid, or if you're not taught as part of like a curriculum, I don't know how you expect people to know that. So budgeting for sure. I mean, it's like a little bit of like a boring subject. Like I'm sure we'll do an episode on it, and it's a little bit like a boring subject. Like you have to kind of roll up your sleeves a little bit. And like I sent you guys budgets right before this episode, like family budgets. How did that go, guys?
It was painful to even open up the Excel.
Right. See?
Ellie, let's be transparent. Did you actually open up?
I opened it up. I shared it with my wife. I said, we have to do this. She says, I agree. and then the conversation ended there.
I didn't open it up, but the small part that I could say is that my wife and I, we budgeted every single thing for like 3 months at a certain point, and I'm sure in the budgeting episode they'll be discussed, but I felt like a millionaire. We had so much extra money, and we're like, we are not spending properly. And we're not big spenders.
Well, maybe you should be saving more. Well, that'll be in the saving episode.
I like
see,
that.
there you go.
Yeah. So if you had to talk about the different episodes, I mean, there's a budgeting episode, there's a saving episode, there's looking at the largest expenses. But I think something super important to hit in an early episode, maybe in episode 2, is how do we view hishtadlus versus emunah and betachon, or more specifically, how much work we need to put into our careers and earning money versus believing in God and trusting in Him to provide for us, right? That's straight through. Birchas Hamazon is talking about Hashem will provide. He is the sole provider, and anyone who believes otherwise is foolish. Versus, hey, we need to go to college, we need to get a job, we need to ask for the raise. The raise is not just going to come to us.
Right.
How do we balance those two? And I would imagine, just to piggyback off that, this is not a non-controversial topic, right? When someone hears the gist and the focus of this podcast, people are going to raise their eyebrows and be like, hey, where's their emunah and betachon?
Exactly. No, it's such a good point. I feel like there's a lot that like has the potential to be controversial here, and I just want to say, like, before I even like take that on, which I won't take on because I'm not a rabbi, and you can't possibly give like an answer that fits all. And I think that's what I wanted to address before we even like get into that. I think what's super important to note here is that there is no one right answer that any guest can come on this podcast and say, like, this is the thing and everybody has to or should do this. The goal on this podcast is not to tell people what they have to do. It's to try to like frame issues and like really get into like the guts of framing an issue, helping them understand what the variables are. And then that gives them enough information so that, for example, they can ask a question to their rav or rabbi and say, listen, like, here's the issues that I have. Here's the issues I'm dealing with. Here's what we're going to need to be earning, like, as an example, which we'll talk about more. You know, like, what do you think I should do now? And that's like a perfect example of that is like your question of like emunah and betachon, right? What's the right amount of hishtadlus? Like, you know, there was a Rav Yaakov Hillel, like, just put an article out in Mishpacha magazine. They did an interview with him a couple weeks ago, and he said, you know, I know a lot of people that are working 2 hours a day that are making a fortune of money, right? Like, maybe we need to be going back to the Rambam's breakdown of how many hours a day a person needs to be, you know, working 5 whatever hours a day and sleeping 8 hours a day. And, you know, and learning 8 hours a day, and the rest of is for their family and to sleep. And then on the other hand, you'll have somebody who said what you said before. Well, listen, like, practical hishtadlus in 2021 is, you know, if you need to be making a certain amount of money, which we'll talk about, then you know the only way to do that, b'derech hateva, is to X, Y, and Z. And then those are that's the point where you do the best you can to frame the issue, and then people have to ask their own questions to whomever they ask their questions to get personal hadracha or guidance on what to do about that. But you know, that's a really good question. Yeah.
Like I think it's G.I. Joe. They say knowing is half the battle. Because I'm using myself, but I think that represents so many from Yidden here that we're just going and doing and we're trying to make money and we're trying to support our family. But it's also, wait. We have to understand like how it's coming in, how we're spending it, how we're going about it. And if we don't even think about that, then how are we really supposed to advance in from finances?
For sure. And I think G.I. Joe actually stole that quote from the Gemara, right?
Okay.
Like, Shelas chacham chatzi tshuva.
Ooh.
Right? Like the knowing how to ask the question is half the answer.
I wonder if Snake Eyes is also in the Gemara.
Oh.
Is that a G.I. Joe guy?
I don't know.
Or is that Mortal Kombat?
That's the Sudoku reference. But, okay, so what is the magic number, right? Based on the research out there, right? You know, the audience, the growing audience that we have here wants to know, how much money do I need to make as an Orthodox Jew living in a somewhat busy city? How much do I need to make in order to stop my hishtadlus and now focus on my learning, etc.?
Right. So that is a super hard question to answer, and it has a lot of variables. But it's an important one that at least we talk about. Like, at least we'll get into it. Like, there's no one right answer for everybody, and it has a lot of variables, but let's discuss it. First thing is first, before we understand how much we need to make, let's understand how much the average non-Jewish person in America is making. And that'll like just provide like a context and perspective for like the rest of the conversation, just to show you how difficult and challenging it is sort of to live within our variables, right? So the median income of a person in America is, a single person is $31,000, and the median income of a couple, meaning people who are married, both of them working, $68,000, right? Which is, if you're earning more than that, you're earning more than the average person, the average couple in America, right? So like straight away, pat on the back, husband's a Rebbe, wife is maybe a teacher or, you know, a physical therapist or whatever it is. They're earning $85,000, $90,000 combined. They're already earning 25, 30% more than the average family in America. So right off the top, like that, just to provide a little bit of context. And then to really answer your question, for every family, like we said before, there's not one right answer for every family, for sure. But with that being said, if you live in the tri-state area and you want to live in an average, to, you know, a house that can accommodate a family of 4, 5, 6 children, let's say with a mortgage of $3,000-$4,000 a month, maybe some more, some maybe a little bit less, right, with a good interest rate, and you want to send your kids to yeshiva and pay full tuition. So we'll talk more about tuition like as a separate thing, but let's say tuition as an average, let's say in the yeshiva, more Haredi community, let's say an average of tuition is somewhere between $8,000 and $15,000, like closer to 8 if you live in Lakewood, closer to $15,000 if you live in Far Rockaway or in town yeshivas. In Brooklyn, it's a little bit less. And you have 4 or 5 kids that you're putting through yeshiva, and you've got a traditional Jewish Orthodox lifestyle with Yamim Tovim and with tutors and with maybe a little bit of therapy and a little bit of like everything else that's going on, right? Chances are, just to wake up in the morning and pay full tuition and everything else that's going on, you need to be earning $200,000 plus pre-tax. Not everybody, and there are ways to mitigate that, but if you're living in the tri-state area, at the very least, and you know what, a good barometer that I like to use sometimes to try to identify where the line is where schools give scholarships, tuition reductions, at what's the level that schools give scholarships. So at some modern Orthodox schools, if you're earning less than $300,000 a year, you qualify for a scholarship, which is just like parenthetically, that's astounding, right? Like if you earn less than $300,000 a year, right? The top 4% of income earners in America are earning more than $300,000 a year. So if you're earning less than $300,000 a year, you qualify for financial aid. Amazing, right? In some schools, it's $200,000. Some schools, it depends on how many kids you have, and there's a formula that they use. Some schools use a formula of 20% of the total income goes to pay tuition. So if a family is earning $200,000, the schools expect $40,000 of that to be paid in tuition divided among the kids. So if it's $40,000 and there's 5 kids, so it's $8,000 a year in tuition. So what I sort of find interesting, and I've worked with a number of schools across the country over the years, what I find interesting is I always ask them, like, what's your tuition scholarship threshold? And by doing that, you get the idea of what those schools think that people in their community need to be earning in order to pay all their other bills. And that's how they make the calculation. Now, you can argue some of them are too aggressive, some of them are not aggressive enough, some of them do it based on how much they need to keep their lights on. But ultimately, like just to round it out, ultimately what that means is that our families, forget extravagant spending, no extravagant spending. We can talk about that later. Like no extravagant spending. Our families need to be earning in the top 4, 5, 6% income earners in America, just to be making ends meet, not to be rich, not to like buy a boat, buy an extra car, like drive a Mercedes. Like if you speak to the average non-Jewish person on the street that's earning $250,000 a year, they have money to put away for retirement. They're probably driving a beautiful car. They've got a second house somewhere. Our $250,000 earners are like trying to figure out whether or not they qualify for financial aid to send their kids to school.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So that's like, it's important. Now, again, there's mitigating circumstances. You can move, you can live in a smaller house. You can live in an out-of-town community. You can live in Lakewood where tuition is lower. And like, we can talk about all of that. But like averages, just like averages, we have like, with no extravagant spending, we are asking a lot from the average family. It's a big deal.
So why address this? Is this something people are clamoring for? Are they suffering without even knowing that they're suffering? If we were to ignore this, right, put our head in the sand, where would this go, right? I'm imagining people are getting older. Are they working longer? What's the current status of people's careers as they enter in their 60s and 70s? I'm imagining they're supporting families that may not have the funds. I know we discussed this prior to the show, but I'd love for you to enlighten the audience.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's two separate questions here. The first is, why are we even talking about it at all, right? Like, if there's some people like are going like, so what? So you're telling us how hard it is? Like, what's the point? And then we'll get into the retirement thing. So the first thing is, again, it goes to what we were saying before. Basic hishtadlus, I think, requires people to have an understanding, and this is not my thinking, this is my hadracha from my rebbeim. Basic hishtadlus means understanding what the realities are and making decisions based on your perspective on Yiddishkeit and your perspective on Judaism and Hashkafa. Based on that, making decisions. So the answer is, the first thing is, if you can with kosher money, if you can educate a population on the types of issues that they need to take into account, then people can start making decisions earlier. They can start planning better. They can understand. It's funny, like some people are like, listen, I don't want to come for financial counseling because I know I'm not making it, right? Like, I know I don't have any money. Like, credit card companies are calling me all the time. Like, like, what's the point? I know I don't make enough money, right? You're going to tell me I don't make enough money. And then what's really interesting is when you get into it with them and you get into their budgets with them, and they can make some decisions on where they want to save, and they make decisions on maybe they want to earn a little bit more, maybe take a second job. And then they realize that part of their problem actually isn't that they're not making enough money. Maybe part of the problem is they're paying 28% interest to a credit card every month. And if you can help them renegotiate their credit card and you take out that piece of it, guess what? They're actually very close to making ends meet. And you just need somebody to help them understand the issues. Like, there's another famous chazal, which I quote all the time because I think it's an amazing insight into human nature, is ein chavush matir atzmo mibeis asurim, which basically means a person who's in prison can't free himself. What does that mean? It means that a person who's caught up in their own problems, very often you just need somebody else to help them articulate and understand it better and help them work with them towards a solution. And they'll see things that they never ever would have seen, like in their own challenges. So education is a fantastic thing. Bringing these issues to light and helping like educate people, fantastic. And then you were talking about the second part of your question was, well, are people working longer? And the answer is, I mean, somebody who I respect very much and is a very important osik b'tzarchei tzibur, who I'm not going to quote by name, he said, what he said to me was, one of the biggest ticking time bombs in Klal Yisrael today, and he's saying this from a place of intense knowledge, is the fact that people are working. The fact that people are working to make these payments, they're supporting their children after they get married, and they're not saving for retirement. They don't have the money to be able to retire. They don't have a plan to be able to retire, not necessarily even due to any fault of their own. But it's going to be a very significant issue. If people want to work until they're 75 or 80 or whatever, then great. But in other words, many people don't. Many people may not be able to. What are we doing as a klal, as a tzibur? What are we doing to help and to help guide and to help provide advice? And obviously, people need to talk to their own rabbi. People need to talk to their own financial planners, and that's for sure true.
If they have a financial planner,
exactly.
I feel like 98% of people listening to this are like, right, yeah.
So Yaakov, do you have a guy?
No.
You don't have a guy?
Could you be my guy?
I'm not a guy. Totally. Like, remember Naftali Horowitz was on your podcast that you had done. Meaningful people. Yeah. Are we saying meaningful people?
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. Yeah, because I think you're a meaningful person.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So
we joke that Nahi's the meaningful and I'm the people.
That's a good joke. That's a funny joke.
But what were you referencing?
No, so Naftali was on your podcast, right? And it was the first time I had ever heard him. I was totally blown away. And we actually reached out to him to to start Living Smarter Jewish with us, and he is, and which we're really excited about. But he was talking about like investing, and you just need to like get into the market and not think about it. He's a guy.
It's funny you mention him because meaningful people, we try to talk to people about their lives, what they've been up to. And what I walked away with that was like, I want someone like Naftali Horowitz to feed me so much more information that I don't know that's not what we're doing. But I really hope and I really believe Kosher Money is going to tackle these. Like, it's not about the people here. It's about the topics. Exactly. And it's about the conversations that we're maybe too scared to have, or it's difficult to have.
Or we don't even know we need to have.
Exactly.
And so like someone like him would love, Mir Hashem, for Eli to sit down with him and go through what he's great at and to teach what he's good at.
And Zevy, there are people out there that have the knowledge and the skill sets to help other people, right? It's not that we're living in a world where the tools aren't available. It's that people aren't familiar with the strategies and the tools available to better themselves.
100%. And that's, yes. And we want to, and part of our goal with Living Smarter Jewish is to make those tools available to everybody free of charge. And so we're not going to be everybody's like financial planning guy, but we want to at the very least make counselors available to people to call, like, and to be able to ask questions, to have them look at their budgets. And I just want to say at this point also, like, plug for like Living Smarter Jewish is the OU.
Sure.
Right. So if I can at this point, so the OU is, I think everybody knows the OU, like the Kashrus organization. They have so many different departments, and one of their departments is community services. And the goal of the community service department is to partner with organizations like Living Smarter Jewish and Kosher Money as a podcast to elevate communal values. And like the OU feel like, and Rabbi Moshe Hauer and Moshe Bain, who's the president of the OU, they feel very strongly that financial literacy is a Torah value. It's not like somebody once went to Rav Hutner. They say the story with Rav Hutner. You're Chaim Berliner, right?
Yes.
So you'll appreciate this story.
Me too.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, you too?
Yeah.
You're Chaim Berliner also?
Elementary, but
we won't hold it against.
No, I want to be involved.
No. I'm kidding. I'm from out of town. I don't get to hold that against anybody. No. So they say the story. I heard the story from Rabbi Hauer yesterday. Somebody went to Rav Hutner and was talking to him about how challenging their job was, and that they don't have like a work-life balance, and their job was so hard. And it's like, I'm a yeshiva guy. I was sat in kollel, and my job it's brutal. And Rav Hutner said to him, he says, you're looking at it the wrong way. He said, it's not two houses. Like, okay, my work is one house, and then I go home, and like that's where I learn, and I have my family. He's like, it's one house with two rooms, and you have to balance the two, understanding that both of them you're living in a Jewish context, right? And you have to have the right hashkafa for both of them, because working is a Torah value. Finances are a Torah value. Actually, I have a Rambam here. A disciple of the wise adjusts his affairs judiciously. He eats, drinks, and supports his family within his material success, and he should not overburden himself more than necessary. That's it. The wise men commanded and said, Chachamim, ever let a man eat less than what his financial means allow. Dress within your means, but honor your wife and children with even more than your means allow. So that was like to get the women listeners in here so that they can tell their husbands that, right, there's no budget when it comes to
spending. And the kid listeners.
It's the Rambam, that's right, and the kids, toys. I have a toy company in my spare time. So like,
no way.
So I'm plugging my toy company.
What's the name of it? What's the name of it? I know you're not allowed.
Am I allowed to do that?
Yes,
why not?
Do that? Yeah, it's Make It Real. We make girls' toys for like girls' activity, arts and crafts, stationery,
That's
cosmetics.
So cool.
Yeah, so I make toys for a living.
So you touched on children, right?
Yes.
Is that where we need to start educating people, or is that a bit early? I know that's going to be a conversation unto itself.
Yeah, such a good question. Children, yes, absolutely. You cannot start early enough. And Mesila actually has, this organization, Eretz Yisrael, they have a phenomenal English language curriculum for schools, Torah approved, Gadol approved. Like, it's a fantastic curriculum. We're not reinventing the wheel. Like, strongly encourage people to use that curriculum in schools. And we're working with schools, we're working with rebbeim and principals to because again, the problem is that people look at it as two separate things. There's like the finance stuff, which I hate, I know is a problem and I don't want to deal with. And then there's like my Torah life and my Yiddishkeit. And it's like, it's not two different things.
When it comes to working for a business or starting a business, have you seen, and I think this will be a conversation or its own episodes where we talk to actual business owners, right? Do you think that is one of the solutions where in order to make it as an Orthodox Jew with your finances, you need to start a business because working for someone else just won't cut it? Or that's not necessarily the solution here?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're like going to start me on like on a monologue here. So, and again, like what we're trying to do in this episode, I feel like is just like give people like a taste of what's to come.
Yes.
But it's such an interesting question because the reality is there's 15 million entrepreneurs in the United States, meaning that entrepreneurship is a relatively small percentage of actual, like as a percent of entrepreneurship versus career, relatively fewer people are involved in entrepreneurship. In the Frum community, in the Orthodox community, we have a much, much higher percentage of entrepreneurs. Part of that is because there are different sectors in the Orthodox community where children are not encouraged to go to college and pursue post-secondary school education or even high school education. And by definition, what that leads to is when they want to earn a job, entrepreneurship is really the easier way to go. And we have, like, I think BuzzFeed did an article on Amazon sellers in the Orthodox community, and I think something like a crazy high percentage of third-party sellers on Amazon are Orthodox.
Sure, they have conferences dedicated
to it.
Yes.
It's incredible. So
WhatsApp groups.
I'm going to put a plug in for another organization that I run. It's called the Jewish Entrepreneur. And
maybe just tell us which organizations you're not involved with, and we'll work that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's the Jewish Entrepreneur?
So the Jewish Entrepreneur is an organization we started 5 years ago, and the goal was to aggregate mentors who are like successful people in the Jewish community around the world and match them with people looking to start or grow their businesses. So we currently have 350 mentors active. We're averaging 600 matches a year, and we're up to about 2,400 matches made over the last 4 years between people and like, thank God, like the numbers of like the increased revenue that people attribute to having a mentor, we track it like super closely.
I was going to ask, how do you measure success there?
Yes, so it's a really good question. How do we measure success? And the only way we know how to measure success is by asking the mentee, did you feel like this was a good experience? And can you give us like an estimate of like how much money you earned based on having a mentor? And so the numbers are in the tens of millions of dollars, thank God. So like we're really, really happy and excited about the growth of that. And again, it's the achrayus, it's the responsibility of our community to go where the issues are and try to present solutions, which is what I feel like we're doing here. And so we saw that there are so many people that are opening businesses, but the reality is, first of all, not everybody should be an entrepreneur. Like I have to say, that's the first answer to your question, is not everybody who wants to start a business should be an entrepreneur. Like there's a profile, again, b'derech hateva, there's a profile of what a successful entrepreneur looks like. Somebody who has a certain level of risk tolerance, the ability to get knocked down and come back again. Somebody who's not afraid to hear the answer no. Like somebody who is able to have a certain level of detail oriented and is able to track budgets. See budgets? See what we did there? We're like put in a play for right. Somebody who's able to track budgets and somebody who's able to manage people. Somebody who's well-spoken and is able to interact with different stakeholders and make it all work, right? 50% of all businesses fail in the first 5 years and 80% of businesses fail in 10 years. That's from the SBA, the Small Business Administration's numbers. So at the end of the day, it's very risky. And also, one second, another thing, starting a business needs money. A lot of money. So Baruch Hashem, we have great organizations like EPI and Hebrew Free Loan Society that are there to lend people $50,000, $75,000 interest-free, right? Amazing. So I've been running EPI's branch in Baltimore. We only lend people $25,000 interest-free, payable over 3 years, and it certainly helps. But at the end of the day, every business owner is eventually going to need to develop a relationship with a bank where they're able to bank and get loans and be able to fund the growth of their business. So entrepreneurship is difficult, but for some people it's unfortunately for some people, it's the only choice because they don't, right? If somebody starts thinking about their parnasa at 27, 28, and again, we're not suggesting that you do this or don't do that. Just we're trying to qualify a story. If somebody's 27, 28, and they're leaving Kolo, they're thinking about their parnasa for the first time, there are great organizations that are out there to help them and find either a job or a career as best they can, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, if you're 28 thinking about it for the first time, and you now have 2 or 3 kids that you're paying tuition for, and you've got to be earning like maybe at that young age, maybe 120,000 a year, you may not want to start school to become an accountant where your opening salary is going to be 50,000 or 60,000. Now, it could be that's fine, and you have people to support you. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, entrepreneurship for some people is the only option that they have. But we consider at TJE, the Jewish Entrepreneur, we consider our success as much when we help somebody be successful in their business as when we tell somebody don't do that because you're going to lose $75,000 of your mother and father-in-law's money.
Interesting.
A factor that I think that comes into play here also, that at least I see this. I have certain friends that are from a background that they're extremely wealthy, and then I have certain friends that they're from a background that their parents were always struggling financially. And it's so interesting to see like the tone and types of conversations. And I remember a specific friend, like he was so surprised, like why can't they come out to eat? Like it's so crazy. And it was like, no, like I feel like maybe we were in the middle. I don't know, but it was so interesting. And the other side was always like resenting and upset about it. And there's kind of there's a divide in the Frum community of the uber rich and then the uber struggling. And hopefully we'll help people get an achdus over here. And
that's that's a really good point, because the Orthodox Jewish community is probably unlike most communities in the world in terms of how we're structured. I'll give you an example. If you take somebody who grows up as a blue-collar son of a police officer in the Bronx, right? Chances are all of their neighbors are all sort of in that same strata. Blue-collar workers, maybe a white-collar job, but in other words, more or less living within the same strata, within the same neighborhoods. And they're not necessarily growing up looking at like some hedge fund manager on the 50th floor of the World Trade Center going, okay, I want to be like that guy. Like that guy, right? He earns $50 million a year. That's my aspiration. And that's like that most part of the world, because what you at the end of the day, the hedge fund manager is probably living in, wherever, a gated community somewhere with other people in the same, financial, social strata. And that's just the way it works. It's segregated. In the Orthodox community, it's not. And this is what is the source, and this is exactly what you were saying, right? Like I went to school, and we all went to school with people at every single different financial level. Like some people whose fathers were a Rav or a Rebbe or in Kolo, sitting right next to, in shul and in school, the child of a really successful hedge fund manager or attorney or, whatever. And we grow up together. We go to each other's houses to play. We sit next to each other in shul. And at the end of the day, it can cause certain tension and aspirations, but like my Rebbe, Rabbi Howard, said, like when I had this conversation with him, he said something really interesting. He said, think of the beautiful side of that. Think of the average person, let's say like an average balabas who has a son who comes to shul, and the son looks at the Rav or like a Rosh Yeshiva who also davens in the same shul and says, I aspire to that. Like I want to be a gadol when I grow up, and I have exposure to gedolim and to really like superstar people, so it really cuts both ways. But to your point, it's like our community is a melting pot of every single different financial strata, and we're all together. It's a classless society. We don't have classes in our community.
Beautiful. In terms of the topic, when it comes to finance, the kosher world, I would imagine people have different opinions, right? I do think that some of the things we'll discuss throughout the episodes will be considered hot button topics, and I don't expect every guest to agree with every guest, and same with the audience. I do think that there will be things here discussed that maybe an audience member has a different opinion, right? I do see this as, and I'm particularly excited about the Q&A episodes where people will write in, submit, whether via video, email, voice notes, where they'll discuss with us their questions, and then we'll have guests answer it. But it's not naive for us to think this will be somewhat of a character forming experience, right?
100%. I mean, yes, we are very much expecting people to disagree, even strongly disagree, with either what we're saying today or with what any of our future guests are going to say. And that's totally okay. I mean, and that's really what we were trying to say, I think, also in the beginning of the podcast, which is like, it's okay. It's okay for everybody to have a different answer to the same question. That's completely okay. Our goal is not to tell people, here's what you should do. Our goal is to tell people, here's the story as best we know it. Here's what we see. Here are the statistics. Here's like a little bit of like a view from like an elevated, like from an eagle's eye, point of view. And from what we're seeing, and then make your own decisions in terms of what are your priorities, what are the things that are most important to you, and then some people it's super important. Like Yaakov, you were telling me you don't think you could move out of town.
Yeah, it's I'm classic.
Is that true?
I kind of did. I'm from Flatbush, and now I'm living in Far so I feel like I moved out of town.
Only a New Yorker would say that, right?
I know, but that's what I mean.
Nobody out of town would
that's what I mean.
But explain that. You feel that lifestyle or just living out of town wouldn't fit your...
Yeah, so I genuinely am jealous of people living out of town because there's a simplicity that you talk to anyone and they're like, it's just so nice. And it's usually the New Yorkers that you talk to that move to Florida or Texas or wherever, and they are able to like, they have a glow to them,
right?
Not just from the tan. And I'm so spoiled with having access to the city and having so many minyanim and the food and the people. I have so much access to people that I'm like, I don't think I'll be like, my wife maybe would be open to it, but I'm just, we're staying together. So she's gonna stay in New York, I guess.
So if they opened the right restaurants, maybe they would be able to entice you.
No, that's part of it. Like the restaurants are a tuffle, but it's just, even the slower mentality, like it gets me anxious in a certain way. Like I like the fast pace.
Right.
So on that note, Zevy, do you see more people moving out of town for financial reasons?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, there are communities like in Texas and Ohio, and the Aguda and the OU are both like making this a priority to advocate for tuition vouchers. And if you have Republican state governments that are offering tuition vouchers, it's the cost of sending your kids to school in Cleveland and Columbus is infinitely less than it is in New York. And I mean, tuition, and it's...
But on the flip side, the income opportunities are also lower.
So yes, and 16 months ago, that would have been a much more powerful statement.
Right.
But now, post-COVID, we're seeing a huge opportunity for people to be able to make moves that they never were able to and work remotely. And there's major corporations that are saying, in perpetuity, we're completely comfortable with people working remotely. So it is more of an option. And just to go back to something you said before, I think one of the things that I'm really excited about for these coming episodes and like in between episodes is to hear people's questions and people's personal, like this is so personal for everybody. Like how many people are there in Claudius that go, no, I never have to worry about money. Like I always have money for anything that I want. Besides for Yaakov.
No, but even the richest person, they need to know how to manage their money or invest their money or for their children, they want it to grow. So it affects...
hopefully they have a guy for that. Like if they're relying on us, then like...
For sure.
But there's a component there that even the wealthy need to educate their children and want to set them up in a way that if for whatever reason that money dries up, they want them to have the tools to be smart.
And also to understand everyone, like it's...
For sure.
It's a struggle somewhat.
Yeah.
So
people appreciating, like Rebbe Hauer, and I keep coming back to him. He's been my Rav for 14 years. He said, like, the goal of living smarter Jewish and kosher money, like one of the goals is to get people to realize that it's a lot more comfortable to drive a 10-year-old car that you've paid off than to drive a new BMW or Lexus that you have no idea how you're going to pay for it.
So true.
Like, it's so much more comfortable. And like, if that, like, even like a little bit, we can like help, and our guests that we'll have like can help provide like some Torah perspective on that, and like this
is so aligned with. I just want to talk about. I know Eli mentioned it in the intro, but Kosher Money is under the Living L'Chaim umbrella and collaborating with with living smarter Jewish, and I don't want people to get confused living, but the idea with the word l'chaim in there, obviously we all know it's like classic like bageling, like oh l'chaim, and it's associated sometimes with making a l'chaim on and bracha and with a drink, but the goal of this is to help people have that peace of mind that we're always, at least as I get older, I'm always like thinking about this, always in the back of my head, like, okay, I have a responsibility. It's in my ksuba to provide for my family, and my wife has it on her head, and I'm sure everyone has that to some extent. And the goal is to have these conversations, and maybe we're not answering all the questions, and there's probably millions of episodes we could do, but the goal is that someone has that feeling after, though, like, you know what? This is opening up a conversation, and I'll start to be able to deal with my finances better because of this.
Yeah, and like you said, like I hope that everybody who listens to this episode sends in a question. Like, we may not get to all of them, but like, we'd love to hear stories. We want to hear people's stories, because by hearing people's stories, it helps articulate and define for us what we need to be talking about. So yes, like if you're listening, please like send us a voice note. We'll do it we'll give the number or whatever.
Yeah, in the outro.
In the outro, yeah. So we're really excited about this.
I'm excited. Yeah, I think that's the theme, to elucidate and help.
That's a very fancy word. Can you translate?
Yes,
can you
it's an art scroll word. You can tell I'm a learned individual. But I'm excited. There's some.
You didn't tell us about your background. I followed you before you knew who I was. So
that
can
is
you just
correct.
so
I'm
don't
Eli.
be modest.
I'm the brother of a co-host of Meaningful People Podcast.
Wow.
My background is in digital media marketing. Mm-hmm. I work in an agency that is focused on supermarket marketing specifically, but digital marketing, email marketing, social media management, online reviews. My background before that was at CNBC. So it was...
Name drop. That's what you do like on Meaningful, right? You like name drop.
Right. Okay. So I spent almost 4 years there, and I sat in the newsroom, which was kind of cool. Not many Orthodox Jews get to sit with the yarmulke inside a massive news corporation's headquarters. So I got that exposure, and people say, hey, why did you leave? Right. That's really cool.
That's what I was going to ask.
The problem is cool doesn't pay the bills.
Right? See, I like how you brought that like, full circle to Kosher Money.
So there was a need to not necessarily work harder, but try to find opportunity that will help me pay my bills, right? I didn't want to be in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 kids. It just doesn't work. So I had to leave there and look for other opportunity. And Baruch Hashem, I've been fortunate to start something great here together with great people. But I'm particularly excited to learn, meet people that have answers to questions people don't know they even need to ask.
Right.
And I think it will be very beneficial for the community. Like you said, even if we make a tiny impact here.
Yeah. So you're saying if CNBC was listening to this and they wanted to like raise your salary and bring you back, you'd be open to that? That's what you're saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and on that note, and on a serious note, I think we should always be open to having conversations, right? We shouldn't turn people away when they have insight or an idea. Right. I think specifically when it comes to finances, people should be open. Whether they think they might have the answers or not, they should be open to discussing and being more transparent. I know when it comes to mental illness, we've come a long way in our community to sort of break that stigma associated with it. I would like to see the same when it comes to from finances.
For sure. And it's actually funny you talk about mental health. So I'm involved with Relief, which is a mental health organization.
Oh gosh, another.
Okay, stop. No. That wasn't like a name drop. Like
an amazing organization.
It's an amazing organization, and what's fascinating is like it's exactly what you said. It's like mental health used to be totally taboo, right? People didn't discuss it. Nobody talked about it. It happened. It's like the idea of why Relief was founded was you can ask. A person can ask their brother-in-law if they know a good cardiologist, but they can't ask their brother-in-law if they know a good psychotherapist, right? So Relief was founded, okay, call us. We'll tell you, based on the situation, like who the right person is for you. And then like as Mishpacha was doing more and more articles on mental health and stuff like that, and suddenly it went from like taboo to like people like putting on shidduch resumes, like list out the therapists, right?
Is that real?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
My
I
kids
mean,
are
I'm not in
shidduchim,
shidduchim. I'm not in
right.
shidduchim, and my kids are too young for
Right,
shidduchim.
right,
Otherwise, I
same.
wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Right.
It's going to be around, Mitch, when they're in shidduchim.
We'll cut out that. We'll have to like go back and cut out this part. Okay, like
But
just
that's real.
make a note.
People are putting.
That's what I've heard. I don't know, but that's
okay.
what I've heard. That maybe it was said in jest, but I don't think so. I think
Okay.
it's a thing. So, but I guess, but the idea is like if we can, through this sort of initiative, Living Smarter Jewish and Kosher Money, like we really believe that by starting the conversation, whether you agree or disagree with what we said or what anybody said, totally fine. But by starting the conversation, shelas chacham chatzi tshuva, you're halfway to getting where you need to get. And I'll say something else. Like one of the things we were always asked in Mesila was, like, so what does it help if you do a budget for somebody and they're short at the end of the month and they can't work anymore, they can't get another job, they're already working 3 jobs or whatever it is. So what's the point? So you do it for them, they're short, they don't have, right? And you know what the answer is? Like what I heard from somebody said, because it makes them a far better candidate for tzedakah. By somebody working out their budgets and cutting out and making sure they're not spending more than they need to on credit card interest rates or on other things or whatever it is, and they're really living like the best life that they possibly can. And then with that, Baruch Hashem, we have amazing tzedakah organizations that are there for people and that give enormous amounts of tzedakah. But you know what the best way to help those organizations is? Help people live financially responsible lives, even if they're still short at the end of the month and they need a little bit of help. Like that's a huge help to making our tzedakah our tzedakah organizations more efficient.
Love that. Love that. So I think we're all excited here.
Yeah, this is great.
We have a lot to look forward to, and I think as the audience grows and the episodes start filling up the streams, we'll be on YouTube. We'll have a website. People will be able to submit questions, and I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is really cool.
Thanks for coming down.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
That was a great episode.
There you have it. One in the books.
I just want to clarify. I'm only on the first episode. I'm not going to be on the other ones. You're gonna.
Yeah, we didn't have budget for Yaakov for future episodes, but you were great.
Thank you.
I thought Zevy was great. Really set the table on why we're doing this and what to expect in future episodes.
Yeah, he's really good. He's one of those people that like not too many people know of him yet, but they need to get to know him.
Right.
And I know you've shot already. I don't know, spoilers. You already shot the second episode. Third episode's already being made. So definitely anyone who's listening to this should please, it's free, subscribe, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple or watching it on YouTube, and you get to see the journey that Eli's going to be on and take us all through. I'm excited.
Kosher Money. It's where it is.
Yeah. And if you want to check out more information, you can go to livinglechaim.com, and we have a few phone numbers and emails that are still coming out, but check out the rest of the episodes for all of that.
So hit us up. We do love feedback, comments, questions, what you want to see on future episodes. Do not be shy. I know the hate mail is probably coming in, more so for Yaakov than me. But
Are you going to give them your personal cell? Like if you're really, your heart's in this?
Yeah, I could. You can hit me up at...
Maybe not.
Okay,
maybe
forgot
not
that.
yet.
Looking forward. We'll see you next week.
I feel like you need to come up with a catchphrase to end it off with. You'll come up with it eventually. If you've just finished this episode and you're like, I still have questions, you could go to livingsmarterjewish.org to find out more there.
LivingSmarterJewish.org, as you heard in this past episode, is where you want to go to get your finance questions answered. It's where you want to go to find someone who can possibly lead you in the right direction. If you have any questions, they're an email away, info@livingsmarterjewish.org. That was a great episode. Looking forward to many, many, many more.
You can find out more about Kosher Money by visiting livinglechaim.com, and you can see the other podcasts that we're going to have there. This podcast has been hosted by my brother, Eli Langer, produced by me, Yaakov Langer, and brought to you by Living L'Chaim in partnership with Living Smarter Jewish, an awesome organization under the awesome umbrella of the OU. Until next time, enjoy life. Living L'Chaim.